and I mean that.
I don't think we have.
No.
I don't-
As long as they
I don't-
adjust.
No.
Yeah.
Made one.
Okay,
and done.
who is right next to Ann, between Ann and Roy? What is her first name? Kim. That's right.
I don't think we have a quorum, do we?
Do we have a quorum?
I don't
Let
think
me
so.
see.
Not yet.
We do. Okay, and then who is right next to Julie? On this side? No. No, Julie. John, is it John? Okay, now I've got it. I just have to, I have to have these here. If they're not here, then I don't get it right. Okay, I have 3:02, I guess it is, and I'm going to call everybody, I'm going to call us to order. So I think that's it. We do have a quorum, which is a good thing. Thank you, Aubrey, for, I think, so. All right, what we need to do, pardon?
Introductions.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. There's somebody in here. Okay, we need to go ahead and introduce ourselves, and so I'm going to start over here with John, if you would do that, please.
John DeVoe, City of Women Park.
Julie Ott, League of Women Voters.
Orrin Childers, citizen at large.
Aubrey Day, at large.
Bill Bowles, Park County.
Jim Moore at large.
Ann Esch, Green Mountain Falls.
Kim Mutchler, citizen at large.
Roy Rosenthal, Manitou Springs.
Courtney Stone, citizen at large.
Tim O'Donnell, Kono.
Sharon Brown, City of Fountain.
And Jessica McMullen with PPACG.
And then we need the people in the audience, if you'd just introduce yourselves, please. Oh, okay.
He's
So
the
we,
driver.
so we have a spouse, in other words, or
Yes,
something
we
like
have a
that.
spouse.
Okay. All right. Thank you, all.
Terry, introduce yourself as well.
Yes, I will. Okay, Terry. Okay, welcome. Okay, we do have an adjustment today to our agenda. We need to move action item 4A, which is the 2045 draft chapters for the public release, and that needs to be moved down to an action item, or an information item, an information item. So we're going to make 4A 5C. And I need to have someone move to accept the agenda with that particular adjustment. Jim?
I move to accept the consent items with the amendment to the agenda as explained.
Okay. I need a second.
Second.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. With that, do we have public comments? We have a small public out there, don't we? Okay. So I'm going to move on to action items. And we're going to go ahead with action item 4B. And Courtney, I'm going to refer to you on this, because or Jessica, whomever.
I'm going to kick it off for Courtney. So, as you all know, the CAC was approached by NEPCO with a request for a voting seat on the CAC. We reviewed the request and suggested that we should approve that request and bring it to the board, and then had a really long and great discussion about how we really needed to have a process for how we were going to review those requests going forward. At that point in time, we asked the board to please put that on hold. We took that agenda item off, as we mentioned at our last CAC meeting, and really wanted to formalize how the CAC membership policy and process would work. So between our last meeting and today, the membership committee, it's not really the membership committee, but the policy and process committee, did meet to kind of talk over what those necessary and requested changes should be. So this is where I'm going to hand it over to Courtney to talk about, unless you want me to. It's on Courtney.
Oh, and Michelle Day just joined us. Thank you.
So you guys have all received this notice about the recommended changes, both to the CAC bylaws and to our membership process. I think a kind of big highlights are that we're hoping to move to 5 community-based organization seats within the CAC, and that the process for implementing that is specified in our recommendations from today. I did go to the PPACG board and just give a very broad overview of the fact that we were discussing this, and they didn't have any particular questions outside of just making sure that we were being consistent with bylaw changes as a whole. But as far as I think the actual policy and bylaw recommendation changes, it's about changing community organization representation to have a specific place or a voting process within our membership kind of policy. And then we have some recommended changes to the membership policy committee, to the membership committee, which is a separate group of people who determine who joins the CAC or not and sort of approves that application process. So kind of before you are those recommendations. We've got the fact that we would hope that organizational membership, that they serve an underrepresented community, that they're additive to CAC representation, and that they add diversity to the CAC. As far as implementing these changes, especially in respect to the community organizations that have been sitting on the CAC for years, that we would like to essentially grandfather them into this process for the maximum amount of terms that the community organizations coming in would be open to. That said, all of these recommendations are just recommendations of a subgroup of this whole committee. So as is the case from last month to this month, we're really just open to hearing your feedback and wanting to make sure that we're on the right path with this. So with these recommendations in mind, and I think they might have gotten cut off a bit within this document, but either way.
There's a page out of order.
They're out of order.
That's
Okay.
all there, but you have to find it
Right.
after the bylaws.
Take the mouse, enjoy it.
It's page 25
Yeah.
in our agenda.
Yeah, jump to page 25, and then you're good.
Thanks. Okay. So this is the completion of our recommendation that we hope that as organizations are considered for membership into the CAC, that these qualifications are considered. And yeah, that's sort of general starting place for conversation. So are there any notes, discussion items? I think one of the things that the smaller group of folks had discussed within this conversation was, within our implementation process initially, do we stagger membership terms for groups that are already involved? How do we sort of make sure that transitions with the 3 community organizations that we want to make sure stay involved, if they're interested in that, have the space to do so for as long as is fair? So any thoughts there?
Jim.
Sorry. I got to remember.
No, please, go ahead,
I
please.
remember that.
That's not a problem.
One of the things is, I participated in the committee, and one of the things as an afterthought was, given what we're talking about doing with the proposed change in the bylaws, is grandfathering in 3 organizations that have been representing large neighborhood or community groups for a number of years, and introducing a new member, which would leave us with 1 empty out of the 5 that are contemplated by the proposed bylaw amendment. My feeling was that staggering is something that you do when you are initiating an organization or establishing a new board, and you want to make sure that you do have alternatives going along. But at this point, we're talking about actually starting the grandfathered ones and the new one at the same time. So I believe any discussion about staggering is, I've already said more than needs to be said.
Okay, go ahead, Tim, please.
Well, as a grandfather, I appreciate the grandfather. So if I understand that correctly, I could be here for 8 years total? Because I've already been here 2 years, I think.
That's right.
And I'd start the term all over again.
Okay. Is that what you were looking at, Jim? or-
No. Now, understand, when we talk about this, and Courtney, correct me if I'm wrong, I hope you will, we are talking about the organization having the membership.
Right.
You would be representing Kono, and you could represent Kono for another 6 years under this proposal. So the same Julie could represent the League of Women Voters for another 6 years. It doesn't matter.
That's
Or
not
if for some reason Julie says, I'm tired of doing this, it is the League of Women Voters that selects their representative, but it's their 3-3 term arrangement that would go forward.
Right.
So that's not quite right. Sorry.
I asked Courtney to correct me.
I defer.
People, you would each still have your term limits, so your individual term limits. So Julie,
Me.
who is representing League of Women Voters.
And me.
Or
Tim.
Tim, if you served 2 full terms, but League of Women Voters wish to continue, you would still be term limited out. They would not. They would be allowed to appoint a different representative. So much like El Paso County cannot just reappoint the same person over and over again after they serve their 2 terms, it will be the same for our organizations as just like they serve now.
Is that in here, or in the minutes, or?
I think that would be a good point to clarify within our documentation.
Yes.
Jim still has his furrowed brow.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, perfect.
I was born with a furrowed brow. That was not my understanding coming out of the meeting.
Otherwise, we'd be changing the limits for the entire committee for the individuals. Right now, each of us can serve up to 6 years total.
Right, but what we're talking about is we're changing the membership for the neighborhood organizations.
Right.
So it's not like Tim is an individual representative. He would become the representative of Kono. And Kono would have 2 3-year terms. So it's a Kono decision as to who represents them.
It is, though in our bylaws for individual citizen-at-large positions, we do have individual term limits.
I'm
of
aware of
2
that.
years. Yes,
Right.
yeah. Mhm. So Kono would serve Kono would have 6 years of membership, and as long as the individual serving that did not go past their 6-year total term limit, then they're welcome to continue serving or not.
So,
It's still
and I
confusing.
apologize, I've been out for a couple months. So do we have, are we saying we want to limit the neighborhood organizations to a certain amount of time as opposed to having a permanent seat, if you will?
Yes.
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 Not limiting them.
Okay.
So
I
right now,
apologize.
we've got 3 community organizations who have seats on the board. League of Women Voters, Kono, and Chamber and EDC. I have no clue why this is so loud today. Right now, we are wanting to change the bylaws to, instead of specifically call out those 3 organizations, say that we may have up to 5 members. And we asked all of the organizations, after every 2 terms, so every 6 years, do you still want to be on the board?
So they have to reapply every 2 terms?
Exactly.
The organization?
If we do not have,
Yes.
Okay.
so if the only organizations that ever apply are those 3, there is no competition, it's just, do you want to continue?
The idea being if we had 6 or 7 that wanted to apply.
Right,
We
limiting
would
them.
use that application process to limit them.
So we need to distinguish between the individuals serving versus the organization's
Yes.
position on the committee.
And the term of membership in Section 4 does talk about that. That the full term is 3 years, which begins on one of these 2 dates. And the
Now I get it.
member may serve no more than 2 consecutive terms. This is composition and representation rather than actual individual membership, the section we're looking at changing. I don't know if that helps clear it up, or if maybe we do need to adjust the language that we've put into the bylaws to make sure it clarifies that.
I would clarify that.
Yeah,
Sure.
definitely.
Because there's a difference between the organization and the individual.
Individual.
We need to be
Exactly.
consistent with both.
Right.
So I have a follow-up question. Could you just go through the process for application, just step 1, 2, 3?
So my understanding is that the process for application will be exactly mirrored to our citizen-at-large process. So currently, citizen-at-large representation, of which I am one, is that they send a letter of interest, and that is all that is currently required for our citizen-at-large members, is that they send a letter of interest on how they feel they fit into the roles of the CAC and that they're willing to commit their time in order to do so. And that's the exact same process we would hope to apply to our organizational representation, is that organizations apply for organizational representation based on how well they fit the roles of the CAC and if they are willing to commit an individual representative to fill that role. So they, as an organization, have a seat, and they would designate someone when they apply to fill that seat, an individual, although that individual could potentially change out within the term of the organization's membership based on need.
So they could change out probably at any time if they absolutely needed to.
Yeah, and that's the current process that I understand it is
That's
that
the way I understood it, too.
the three organizational representatives that we have are able to say whether they want to be active or not within that process, and we would hope to continue that. Yes, so they would send in a letter of recommendation, and then they would go through the membership committee of the CAC
Right.
in the same way that we have our individual at-large representatives. My understanding of the individual at-large process is that someone sends a letter of interest, and then that committee reviews those letters and sets up an interview as necessary
Right.
to recommend membership onto this committee.
Right. Okay, Aubrey.
To keep things simplified for this whole grandfathered round, I wonder if just because we have enough difficulty sort of replacing positions, that if at 4 years in, then we need somebody for 2 more years for the Kono position, I wonder if it would be possible to sort of end a partial term and then start them on 2 new potential 3-year terms, depending on who it is and how long they've served, just so that the terms of the organization are lining up with the terms of the people who are representing them. I don't know.
Yeah.
Prior to this, those 3 haven't had any sort of limit.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, those members have, so Kono and League of Women Voters still have the 6-year term. They get 2 3-year terms. That's it. So they can't serve indefinitely.
So the individuals who represent the organizations have 2 3-year terms. The organizations have no limit to the
That's
amount of
what I was
individuals who
getting
can
at.
serve
Yeah. Right,
consecutively.
I thought what we discussed before was after the 2 3-year terms, the organization had to reapply,
No. Prior to this new process,
right?
Right.
as the bylaws currently sit,
Oh.
there is no need
No,
for Kono to
that's right.
reapply, League of Women Voters. You guys have a permanent
Right.
seat, if you will.
Right.
As is,
Now,
yes.
right.
This, no.
Right, but what we're talking about is moving toward a more revolving process that allows
Right.
for 5 open seats, if you will, to be filled by a neighborhood organization.
Organizations.
And
Right.
staggering those terms is what we're trying to accomplish. Okay.
Okay, I'm not sure. Ann, I guess we'll go, and then,
Don't do me, get the other voices first.
oh, okay.
Please.
Ann, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just,
And then Terry.
I don't understand who the Colorado Springs Regional Business Alliance is. They don't come.
The Chamber of Commerce.
It's the Chamber of Commerce.
It's actually it's not them, it's a group of Chamber of Commerce's.
The Colorado
Yeah.
Springs Regional Business Alliance was the name of the chamber and EDC.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
As they were
Yeah.
You're right.
transitioning
It
between
was.
being the chamber and the combined EDC. They have now remerged their name as the chamber and EDC, but the listing that we had was,
Their old name.
yeah.
So, and they haven't been in a long time.
No, and they have asked for a respite from this committee. They have formally asked that
They get to have it and if they want it?
Well, eventually, yeah, I guess. That's pretty much how we do it.
Part of what this process would do is allow current members to say, I don't want my seat anymore. So
At least not now.
that would allow them to step out for a few years and step back in when they had a purpose, rather than taking up a seat.
So
Okay.
what about if someone steps away for 2 years? Should there be a limit on how long someone can step away before their seat is given up? If there's 6 or 7 organizations that want to come through?
We haven't discussed that yet. I'm not real, I don't know. That's a good question.
And I think it may be a question that comes up specifically because we do have organizations that are called out by name in our bylaws through an unrelated name, but don't necessarily feel like they have a place in mind. I would hope that as we look at organizations that want representation in the future, that if they go through this process to apply, that there will not be organizations that choose to take an inactive stance on the CAC, because that's a membership seat that could potentially use representation that isn't getting it. So that currently is absolutely open to the organizations, but I feel like with this process, we're hoping that we get the 5 organizations that have a very full invested interest in being here and representing their needs, and that if they feel like they need to take any amount of time to be inactive, that it's short and limited.
Now, Kono and the League of Women Voters have been phenomenal as far as attendees. I wish that some of our outlying cities would be as good. And I know we've done everything to include double hoops and everything to get them. And so far, that has not worked. And I believe there's even a process that they do not have to be sovereign within the city, that they don't have to live within that city, and they could still represent, because I know that has happened. So, all right, Terry, and then...
So this led me to another thought. Speaking of the communities we can't get involved, I've been trying to get Palmer Lake to get a representative down here, and I cannot. So we have determined people have term limits, but organizations do not. So I'm going to assume I do my 6 years and I still can't get a Palmer Lake person. I can't then come back and represent Palmer Lake because I, as a person, have a term limit.
Correct. You actually would be able to.
Yeah.
But no, well,
Yeah.
I thought you could, but there was like a wait period we put in the last time, or didn't we?
I can't remember the wait period, but maybe you...
We did that specifically because we didn't, the last time we went through this debacle was to not allow someone to basically hop from seat to seat to seat so that we could get diversity of representation.
Right,
And there was at least a year or maybe 2 before you were allowed to then come back in a seat in a different capacity.
Okay.
There's nothing
Okay,
written
okay.
into the bylaws that reflects that, although we're happy, there is nothing in the current bylaws to reflect that.
Okay, John, and then we'll go back to Ann. Okay, I'm sorry. Kim.
Section 4 of the bylaws speaks directly to that point.
I was going to say, I thought we put that in there.
And you could be in the same or a different category. I just want to add one observation, please. And I know John wants to talk,
Yes,
and
yes.
Julie wants to talk.
Yes, she does.
But one of the goals of this was to give this committee flexibility in dealing with the question of neighborhood organizations that came up with NEPCO.
Yes.
So that there is flexibility here going forward. And if we make it too rigid, we're going to box ourselves in. And the whole idea here is to somehow handle the question of neighborhood organizations as opposed to the current structure, which looks at the representatives as individual members. Now we're talking about the organizations being members and whoever they want to represent. And I would say this, in my 5 years almost on this committee, I have seen, I think, 4 different representatives from the chamber. I know at least 2 from the League of Women Voters, and 3 from Kono, or just 2?
Just 2.
Okay. So, I mean, it somehow validates what's gone on in the past and still gives us some flexibility. I'll be quiet now.
That's okay. John, and, okay.
I'm going to pick on Julie. It says in here on the last
sentence of that paragraph, term limits are for organizational membership and not based on individual representation. So that means the League of Women Voters would have to reapply after 2 3-year terms.
Right.
And they could appoint her to continue because it's not based on a representative. Correct? So she's doing a great job for them.
Yes, she
There's no
is.
reason not. And they want to have her, they reapply, you appoint her. Where does it say that?
I'm going to clarify real quick. So the section that you're looking at is composition and representation. So this specifies how representation is defined. That category is in there to clarify that Julie is not the person who is representing, she is League of Women Voters when she sits on that.
Correct.
This is not Julie Ott's seat, this is League of Women Voters. The term of membership is what specifies individual people's terms. So the
This makes it
language in there gets
confusing
a
because
little-
they're two different places within your bylaws
Yes.
And
that
that's-
kind of conflict with each other.
And that's totally fair. We can, I mean, they're not necessarily, I don't think they conflict with each other, but they do need to be tied together.
They need
But
to clarify.
Right.
Clarify, yeah.
If she was on there for 6 years, and then they appointed somebody else, could she go then represent somebody else again? Would her term start over?
I thought there had to be a year between.
The individual has a year wait period
Wait,
after the end
okay.
of their
Right,
second term.
yeah, there's a year,
Okay.
yes.
And
Okay.
then, the first section is what organizations can be represented on the CAC. Section 4 is what defines the individual term versus the organization.
Maybe you put a reference on this to say revert to individual membership and see article whatever, section whatever, so that clarifies that, makes
Okay.
that clear.
Okay. Let's go ahead with Julie, and then Kim.
So I like to wordsmith, and so I have a deletion of a word for you, but just to check in, the organization membership proposals are to demonstrate to the CAC, the first thing is that they serve an underrepresented community. And I'm just curious how you would define that, because Kono, League, and the Chamber, using the present examples, do we represent an underrepresented community to the membership committee?
It's kind of circular logic.
Yeah.
If you're not there, then they're underrepresented.
Okay. Well, as nonprofits, and I mean, you could argue nonprofits are underrepresented here, especially nonprofits with a community-based and nonpartisan outlook. But that and the diversity question, I was curious about the definitions of those.
I think that's a really good, one of the distinctions is between the things we're recommending within this process and then the membership committee's process as a whole. And my understanding leading up to this is that the individual at-large positions, they're built on a case-by-case sort of discussion basis. And so I would imagine that as organizations apply, those are the things that will need to be discussed by that committee, but not necessarily that we'll be able to define as clearly within the regulations or within the bylaws of what diversity means. Although, that said, join the membership committee in order to have kind of that robust discussion about what diversity and representation looks like. Or we can open up the definition of diversity to this committee, although I feel like we jumped into that just a bit within the membership subcommittee, and there's a lot of discussion to be had there.
Okay. Kim?
Sure. So I'm curious where we ended up with NEPCO. Are we not that far now?
We're not that far, is
Okay.
basically where,
We have to do all of this first.
Right.
This is prompted by that. And then,
You're right.
okay.
Okay. Good question. You're right, because they've been on hold and they're going to be on hold for, I think, a while longer.
Well, and then if we're talking about who is underrepresented, then if we're bringing in NEPCO, do we wait passively and let other people ask us for a seat? Or to your point, maybe not that many people will. Or do we go pursue? Maybe there's a SEPCO. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know?
There very easily could be.
Yeah. Okay, I don't think we're out to pursue. I don't think we want to do that. It's if they want to
Pursue,
come
but
in.
let them know of the opportunity.
Yes.
Because right now, it does look sort of lopsided.
Yeah, you're right. Right. Okay.
I'm just scratching my head.
Yeah, thank you.
Aubrey.
I just want to make a plea for consideration for staggered organizational terms. One, because if I'm an organization that's interested and I find out that there's no possibility for another 6 years, you might lose some of that interest. And so
Right.
maybe the organizations that are already here, looking at where those members sit, and then that also helps to solve the whole, because, we all have our term limits listed on the thing. So you're going to have
Right.
the organizational term limit, and then you're also going to have the members' term limit underneath it. I don't know, that seems a little too complicated to me, but.
Good point.
Do you have a thought about a more clear kind of distinction between organizational and individual representation?
I mean, I think it's only an issue right now because of the grandfathered terms.
Right.
Right. I think it won't be a problem moving forward, which is why maybe we consider sort of ending a partial term and starting over, or starting those organizations' terms based on where their members sit at this time. And then that staggers the organizational terms.
Okay. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, I know what Kono, and I suspect what the League of Women Voters is going to do, is if we staggered it, or if we said, you got to resubmit just like everybody, you'd be all back in sync again. I guess we have 5 seats, so if we pass this, we still have 5 seats. Even, I think, with NEPCO coming in, we still have an open seat. And I would suggest that the membership committee then go back to the chamber or somebody and said, you guys ever coming back? Or, if we run out of seats and someone expresses an interest, but I think we have enough seats now with 5, because again, part of the discussion we had was not overloading the CAC with
Right.
Neighborhood organizations. So we want to limit it at 5, and I think five's enough, and we can work around if there's more interest.
It's a good point. Other thoughts, or? Okay, John. Okay, I'm sorry,
You guys
John.
not want to call on me, I know.
No. I still like you, though. But.
So thank you. How much time do you give an organization to take a sabbatical from here? In other words, the Chamber of Commerce. How much time do you give them before they have to drop off?
We have no current guidance.
I don't think there's any guidance there.
So you really need to put that in there, maybe a year, 6 months, whatever you want. Because otherwise...
Then you're permanently dropped, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Or you got to reapply. Or
Right,
you have
gotta
to reapply
reapply.
at that time.
The guidelines for members say that if you miss a certain number of consecutive
Yeah.
meetings,
2.
you
That's right.
are gone.
No, it
Unless
says that you
you
have to
give
go
an
before the board and you have to be
explanation.
notified if that's your next one you missed, and you have to be reconsidered.
Yeah.
I think that's what it says. I just read it.
Something of that nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would-
Consecutive, 3 consecutive, and then they are automatically dropped.
But
That's
that's an
right.
individual?
That's an individual.
It's not auto. That they are, and there's a discussion.
Oh, okay, all right.
But that's an individual guideline, not an organizational one. Yeah.
Yes.
And that is legitimate. There isn't currently clarification for the 3 organizational representatives we have about what inactivity looks like. They are, according to the bylaws, always allowed a seat on the CAC, whether they're here or not, versus some of the other roles that do require representation on a more consistent basis. And I'm very much in support of making those guidelines consistent across individual and organizational representation, that if you choose that it's not, if you are not here, then a discussion comes upon the executive committee to discuss that based on whether you're here or absent.
Well, the chamber, or whatever they're called right now, requested to have a sabbatical, right? Right? And so, I don't know if we need... But they, I don't know, how long?
They didn't specify.
They didn't specify. Wow. Okay, Julie.
My term, not knowing when exactly you discussed the beginning of the 6 months, my term ends in December, so it might make sense to start the league 6 years as of December 1st. I don't know when yours is, Tim, when you would be up for renewal, but then perhaps it would make sense.
4 years.
Okay, so that would be a natural beginning.
Okay.
If you're a year after me, perhaps that would be the natural beginning for Kono's 6 years.
But that's the first three. First 3-year term.
Right. But I'm adding on to what is already in existence. And that, maybe that's not clear. Maybe you wanted us to start 6 years May 1st or 6 years December 1st. But anyway, just following that thought with the chamber, it might make sense to make theirs this coming May 1st as the next date to say, I think that's what our beginning time is, right? May 1st and December 1st.
Yeah.
So if they were to start May 1st or December 1st and then begin their 6-year term,
June 1st.
on notice that you could give this up immediately and reapply later, but they could essentially begin, I was going to say May 1st, because that way they have a notice, and they still have the 6 years to decide if they want to come back, which is pretty generous.
Right. Yeah, very generous. Very generous. Okay, John.
If you believe in this place, show up. If you believe in the work that's being done here, with all the chambers in the area, you can't have one person that can come to a meeting.
They could. Fountain could have one, you could have one.
But what I'm saying is
What
you
he's saying
could
is-
appoint somebody to represent all the chambers. My goodness, the amount of good that this organization does. For everybody in all these counties. Show up to a meeting.
And, yeah, I think they're very much complying with what the current expectations are. So if we have different expectations, we need to make sure that we clarify them and
Correct.
move them forward appropriately, with notice to all of the folks that are here and are not here.
Okay. Yes.
I won't
Kim.
take too long, but maybe
Go
you all
ahead.
that are on the committee can help me explain the logic. So I'm thinking if we have organizations like League of Women Voters and Kono who are active and consistent, why are we going to make them reapply, especially when we have 5 slots and we're not pushed for it? Why are we making them reapply after 6 years?
So we don't currently have 5 slots.
5 open,
We
We
don't.
haven't decided on that yet.
So
But
right
that's a good
now,
question.
we have 3 organizations called out in our bylaws with the seat. And so the hope is that those 3 organizations and others could also have a space at the table. So that whether those organizations have a spot for in perpetuity at the table, or whether there's space to also include other organizations is sort of the context. So on it, I think we had talked about it at the last meeting. I would love if our organizations maintained representation for as long as they are interested, and I would love other organizations to have an identified process to have a space at the table as well. Right now, we have 3 organizations called out in our bylaws that have a seat. We have no identified process for other organizations to have that as well.
Jim.
Julie's suggestion, I think, is elegant. I think it's a perfect way to move into this new model without upsetting our current structure. I do think we have an issue, though, as to how we're really going to deal and how we want to recommend to the board to deal with the Chamber EDC, simply because they have requested an open-ended, you're using the term sabbatical, we have a leave of absence provision, and I don't know whether it assumes that it can be open-ended. It can only be open-ended if the term for an individual member doesn't end. I'm not sure I understand what I just said.
Would it be helpful to make sure over the next week or 2 that we are reaching out to the chamber to get some feedback on their intent with representation? I would hope that the process we design is designed in fairness regardless of who our current organizational representatives are. that process is open for everyone.
Okay. Tim?
In fairness to NEPCO, I'd like to land this plane. I think what we need to do is, I'd like to put forward, separate the issue of the chamber and deal with that separately, but get these bylaws changed so that we can allow NEPCO to come in. So I would like to put forward a motion that says we accept the changes with additional clarification between individual and organizational terms. And is there anything else that we need? I think that was basically it. As long as we make it clear that Section 4 talks about individuals and the new part talks about organizations.
And the implementation, it sounds like, would be based on the current individual's term limit plus 6 years for their organizational
For their
seat.
organization.
Is
Right.
that
So I'd like to
accurate?
just put that motion out there, and then we'll deal with the chamber as a separate
Right.
issue.
Okay. All right.
Ma'am.
Michelle jumped in.
That was good, Michelle. Okay.
If I could, I'm sorry, but I've got ideas here that are going through my head. It seems to me that if we establish clearly, and I think the language right now does establish clearly that the organizations are members, then the rest of the language about term limits, leave of absence, absenteeism, all speak to member. They don't say individual member, they don't say organizational member. So we've established in the language for Section 1, composition and representation, the proposed language, that says that organizations will have a membership. They will be the member, and not Tim or Julie or whoever represents the organization as an individual. And then if we adopt Julie's proposal as the mechanism for instituting it, then I think we get our staggered area and we don't interfere with your 3-year terms or your 6-year terms as they stand.
That was the motion that Tim put forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have first and second. So any more discussion on it?
I have a question. I'm sorry. You know, I've been here about a year, and I'm Green Mountain Falls, but are the little towns always members? I mean, is that how it was originally set up?
We'd like for them to be members. They're invited. They've done just about everything they can to get them
Yeah.
members.
Because I think Green Mountain has had several people that kind of came and didn't come or didn't
Right.
want to.
I'm going
And,
to chime in that within the membership, in the bylaws, it says each entity who is a member of PPACG has a representative subject to confirmation by the Board of
That's what happened
Directors.
with
So-
me. They asked if I'd be willing to do it, and I said, yeah.
Sure.
So then they had to submit my name to the board,
Right,
right?
right.
And I had to say, yeah, I'm interested.
And we'd love for these other, smaller
I get it.
municipalities to have
Wish they
members.
would, yeah, like, well, Bill does. He comes all the way from
Covered the whole Park County.
From all the way from Park County, right.
I
Not
mean,
many
that's-
people, but lots of areas.
Yeah, right.
And that's what they're after with this regional approach, is
Right.
people and land and everything.
Where we have more of a problem is with the eastern smaller cities, and that is, and people do not even have to live within that municipality to represent. And
Yeah.
we've had people there who have done that.
I'm doing that because even though our family has had a cabin in Green Mountain Falls for over 100 years, my husband and I are living in Woodland Park right now.
Sure, sure.
So, but I'm interested, because
Right.
I've grown up here.
I think Jim had
Definitely.
something as well, Sharon.
Call for the question?
John?
Okay, John, yeah. Okay, so do you want to restate what we're doing?
Yeah.
You can't do it twice.
Can you
The
do that?
motion, yeah, the
Would you do
motion
that?
put forward is to accept the changes the membership committee has come up with the clarification language around the differentiation between organizations and around term limits for organizations and individuals. So we just want to make sure that people don't perceive that there's a conflict between Section 4 and the new wording that we're putting in there.
And the implementation of terms is based on?
Right. The implementation of terms is based on the organization.
That currently
Yeah, a one-time thing that'll be
Right.
gone after a few years. So
Right.
I think if we do that, we can present this to the board at their next meeting so that NEPCO has a chance to jump in.
John, do you have
We've already
further
waited.
comment on this? Or?
Not on this one.
Not on this one?
He said this is the only thing we're voting on because he wants to get along with it.
Okay.
I want to land this plane.
I'm going to land this plane, get this thing. Okay, then all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Oh, that was great. Yes.
After a mixed discussion.
Okay.
Sharon, I
Okay.
think Bill has something to...
Oh, I'm sorry, Bill.
While we're visiting the bylaws, might look at Article 6, Section 2, and include emails as a legal method of communicating, just a matter of updating.
And I will mention that was actually one thing that had, was asked when I went and just gave the brief we're discussing.
I
and
say
it's
we've been using them, but
represented
just
at the board.
update the bylaws to include that.
Oh, okay, okay. Just, yes, okay, I see what you're saying, sure. It's a good idea. Bookkeeping, right. Definitely.
So,
Okay.
Just one question to add, what you
Sure.
talked about asking for a timeout.
Mhm.
Just eliminate it and simply say, it's this simply, eliminate that sabbatical, as Jim referred to. You got 90 days to replace the person. That goes past, you got a 90-day window that you don't have to worry about who shows up, and you're not going to do that, but we need somebody here in 3 months.
Yeah.
Who can't appoint somebody in 3 months?
So John, our current, the absenteeism guidelines for everyone, if we just maintain that when a committee member has been absent for a second consecutive time or absent for a third time in any 12-month period, they're open
And
for
you're going
discussion.
to have to go back to chamber and said reappoint somebody else, or you're possibly in harm's way for what you're doing. We
Well,
need somebody here.
Well, the member is the chamber.
I know, they got to appoint somebody.
So is what we have in the bylaws currently, if we apply that to organizations versus just individuals?
Do we apply it to organizations?
Not in the current bylaws.
Then we should do that.
I think that
That would
is
be the way
hopefully
to
what we
solve that,
have.
Not worry about
Yeah.
people asking for time off.
Okay.
Who can't get somebody in through 90 days?
It's good. Okay, so that would be another, that would be another motion then, because now we're talking with
He's
those.
good at that. I'm just giving you some.
Good, go for it. Tim?
Okay, so we were trying to separate the two, so we'll settle on both of them.
There we
So
go.
we need, I'll put forward a motion to get clarification in Section 5 on absenteeism, that it applies to organizational members and not individual members.
As well as individuals.
As well as.
As well as, sorry.
Second.
As well as. John seconds.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Good.
And did we,
Oh, all opposed, yes. Okay, then it carried. Okay. John, do you have further comment? Do you have some more
No,
comment?
I need to get out of here at 5.
Okay, go ahead. Julie, go ahead.
So just to clarify, this will be put into the bylaws, but we've talked about this additional change to add emails. So are you going to bring the bylaws back for a formal approval by the CAC?
so we are, I believe, piecemeal recommending changes to the bylaws. The first was about representation.
Right.
The second was about absenteeism, and I would like to make a motion that we change the bylaws to include email notification in section
Okay.
Yeah. Section 2.
Section 2.
2,
Okay.
that notification of meetings can be done by email to ensure continuity with the rest of the PPACG bylaws.
Okay. Okay, Michelle, second. Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay.
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3. Yeah. We actually covered quite a bit there.
Yeah, we did.
We really,
That was good.
that was very good. Okay, let's see, we have a okay, so that should be the end of the action items.
Right. Now we go to the informational.
And now we're going to the informational. Maybe we could, no, never mind. Okay, legislative report. Do we have that?
We do.
Okay.
So that's why I'm up here, as you all know. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I am pleased to present to you today. So the legislative committee, don't laugh at me, folks, you're making me laugh. At the April 10th board meeting, as you had seen in advance with some exceptions. Thank you, Audrey. At the April 10th board meeting, the board chose to support House Bill 19-1222, which increases tax credit allocations for affordable housing. House Bill 19-1279, Protect Public Health Firefighter Safety Regulations, PFAS, polyfluoroalkyl substances. Yes, I pronounced it wrong. Don't call me on how to spell it. Say it right. To oppose House Bill 19-1261, Climate Action Plan to Reduce Pollution. Senate Bill 19-196, a Colorado Quality Apprenticeship Training Act of 2019. And House Bill 19-1298, electric motor vehicle charging station parking, which we requested to oppose unless amended. We did choose to monitor 1257 and 1258, which are both Tabor adjustments, and reviewed but took no position on 1245, 1177, and Senate Bill 207. Okay. So you'll notice that I said all of that really quick, and that's purely because it's really quick. There have been a few additional bills reviewed since that time, because the committee meets every single Monday. At that board meeting, the committee also made the decision to allow the legislative committee to take positions and to ratify them through the board instead of by waiting for the next board meeting, which would be after the legislative session ends, to present those by email to the board of directors. And if any objections are responded with to me alone, this is not a public, this is not a, they can't talk to each other, this is not an engaged meeting, this is just a, I've got an objection. Within 24 hours, we confirm that as a ratified position. So, for example, the legislative committee met Monday afternoon, took some positions. And those positions were sent to the Board of Directors Monday evening. Board of Directors did not send any objections. So at this point in time, these positions will go to our legislators as these are the PPACG positions. Those positions that are new are House Bill 1319, which incentivizes developers to facilitate affordable housing. Our current position was monitor at the board meeting, and our new position is support. At the previous meeting, we really needed more information on what the bill did and why they did it. And so we were able to get that information, the goals of it, the reporting requirements, and that clarification made the legislative committee want to support it. Senate Bill 239 was a new bill addressing the impacts of transportation changes. The discussion was that this sounded really redundant and unnecessary. The requirement was to create, for the Department of Transportation to create and consult with a stakeholder group to examine these things, and it specified who that group should be. This is very similar to several things CDOT already does. So the committee review determined that the bill was redundant and unnecessary and chose to oppose it. The Senate Bill 19254 is a nursing home penalty cash fund. It addresses where money from penalties to proper operation of nursing homes can be spent and how they can be spent, as well as how those funds can be dispersed as grants. We reviewed it. There are so many possible impacts. Our area agency on aging had not yet had an opinion, and the El Paso County Department of Human Services director had not had an opinion at that point either. Don't know if that's changed. And so we selected to monitor that one. Senate Bill 255 is one that we chose to take no position on. It didn't relate to us, as we did with Senate Bill 250. Other interesting updates, Senate Bill 19107, which PPACG had supported at the beginning of the year, is a broadband infrastructure installation. That one is intended to allow internet service providers to work in coordination with utilities and transportation to co-locate internet lines along with utilities lines to encourage broadband access for rural communities. It's a great idea. We support it. It's been amended but keeps being laid over, so we'll see what happens with it. The Family Medical Leave Act, Medical Leave Insurance Program, it's been laid over. It continues to be talked about. There's a lot of concern about the bill and its current issue from the legislative committee, and so they oppose it. And
some clarification on that. Does that affect nonprofits as well as businesses? So there's no exemption for like us.
One person, 2 people businesses. Yeah, the chamber and the Colorado. Several of the business organizations have announced their active opposition. We reviewed 1298, the electric motor vehicle charging station parking, which we had been opposing, and the sponsor actually amended it to change the fine from $300 and a $62 processing fee down to $150. That was one of the requests that our legislative committee had made, and so we are moving from opposed to monitor. Our second request was that they edit it to just be regarding public spaces rather than private, because private organizations always have the option of towing vehicles parked improperly. Right. And the sponsor was unwilling to do that because the request came from private organizations who company policy doesn't allow them to tow. So, and this bill, in case nobody remembers from last month, was it said that if you park a vehicle in in a charging station spot for longer than it takes you to charge the car, you get this fine. The language is very, very permissive. It's dependent upon the availability. But so it's designed to do 2 things. It's designed to prevent non-electric cars from parking in the spots, and to prevent people with electric cars from using a charging spot to park their car. Charging is not parking. And because most vehicles have a much shorter charging term than they do so
it's still confusing.
Yes. The legislative committee did discuss scheduling a standing meeting for Thursdays for the next 2 weeks of the legislative session so that they could meet if needed. They have no bills to discuss tomorrow, so right now it looks like we will not be doing that meeting tomorrow, which means our next meeting is Monday at 3 o'clock. Does anybody have any questions or any legislation you know about that it doesn't sound like we know about?
I don't know. Tatiana had about 25 slides of legislation.
And hers applies to a great deal more than applies to Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. Mm-hmm. That is the first question that we ask when we're reviewing legislation. Is this a PPACG issue?
Right, definitely.
Jason.
Okay. Thank you, by the way. Thank you. Okay. Public participation. Jason, thank you.
Thank
Welcome.
you. Good afternoon. Jason O'Brien, PPACG Transportation Planner. To start out, just so we don't get all of our little plans confused, the last time we were here talking about public involvement-related plans, we were discussing the Title VI and Environmental Justice Plan and the Limited English Proficiency Plan. Even though they're federally required as separate plans, they're sort of sub-plans that live underneath this larger sort of master public participation plan that's before you today for your comments and discussion. This has been in front of you before in January. It was pulled since that time, just as a discussion item, due to some very substantial comments we received relating to outreach to underrepresented communities. So there's been a substantial amount added on that topic, so we thought it was enough of a change to justify bringing it back before we proceed. A little bit of background. It is a federally required plan, does not determine which projects are eligible for funding. It's designed to be a tool for agency use for us to follow as we complete our work on our various transportation-related products, and also a tool for the public so that they can understand what we do and they can have a good grasp of when and how they can comment on different things. Sets down some requirements, but also suggests ways of going further, doing more public outreach. Pretty much just focuses on being a modern and inclusive public involvement plan. Since we're getting to wrap up our current long-range planning effort over the next few months, much of what's in this public participation plan will really hit home as we do our next long-range plan, which isn't all that far off, even though the current one's not finished, and the next transportation improvement program. And one of the reasons, well, a couple reasons we wanted to do this now is just so that we would have a modern and up-to-date public participation plan, and so that we could work on we could wrap up the 2045 plan sort of with an eye to what we'd like to do next time, so sort of as a bridge. We will be seeking your recommendation of this plan next month, and we'll be aiming for formal adoption at the June board meeting. Any questions?
What was added or changed as far as electronic outreach?
Most of what was added had to do with proactive outreach to underrepresented communities. And there were various things mainly focused on using community contacts and community leaders that we already know, that already serve on our committees and our boards, and sort of engaging our committee and board members more, having ambassadors talk to underrepresented communities, mostly just to try to break down some barriers and build trust, and just to try to have some real engagement. And the plan goes into a lot of detail on the particular things we want to do for that, but that was the main focus of it.
Okay. Yes, Jim.
What is your working definition of an underrepresented community?
Well, it's a little complicated because we have, on the one hand, we have a required definition that's required by the federal government, and they have 5 minority groups that they require us to reach out to and track, and then low income as well. So those we're required to include. Others that we look at, households without automobiles, older residents. There's a little bit in there about their significance with regard to our planning products and how to engage them. But the main ones are the federally required categories, which I think I get them all off the top of my head. African American, Hispanic, which of course is an ethnicity and not a race, so it contains a lot of different races. Native American and Native Alaskan, Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islanders, and then I'm forgetting one, Asian, and then low income. And so those are the 6 that we're federally required to monitor.
I just wanted to be sure that, unlike Harvard, you did include, all groups that could conceivably be touched on here.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Other questions? Go ahead, John.
Are there some low-income areas that don't want any federal help?
I don't know. I don't know if they don't want any federal. In fact, that's one of the things that we honed in on, and that's discussed in the long-range plan and the public participation plan, is to reach out more to these areas and figure out really what they want. And so one of the things we've done is some more work identifying where these populations are sort of concentrated, and there are definitely some distinctive areas, but we need to actually do more of that proactive outreach before we'll know.
The new census will get more information along that line.
That too.
Yep.
And then as we ramp up our next long-range plan, there's likely going to be a lot more proactive outreach.
Okay, good question. Other questions? Okay, so this is strictly informational
Yeah.
for us? Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we need to, thank you. The last one here.
So my item was moved from, Catherine Winger, Transportation Planner, PPACG. Our item was moved from action to information because the TAC committee requested more time to review the documents before we release it to the public. So we've adjusted our time frame from what you actually have in your packet. And so you'll see an adjusted one next month when we bring more drafts to you. So this has been moved to information item, and we will be bringing all of our committees' draft chapters for our long-range transportation plan. A lot of these, about half probably, are kind of adjusted from our last plan, and we do have some new chapters and a lot of updated data that represents the new updated stuff that we have since our last plan about 4 years ago. And so we are bringing them in batches. We have planned for 2 batches, but it might end up being 3 just because some of these chapters are taking a little bit longer to update based on data that we're receiving from various sources, which is also why you see batch 1 isn't sequential. It doesn't have like 1 through 10 or whatever. That's why they're out of order, is because we're bringing you the ones that we're able to update quicker, and then the ones that are coming later are still being worked on, but we're hoping that they'll be done soon. So with batch 1, you'll find a link just to batch 1 in your on your memo, and then next month we plan to bring batch 2. Hopefully all of them will be included, and then an update to the timeline, just to let you know ahead of time. TAC has requested that they get a couple more months to review, so we've set a deadline of August 2nd for all committee members to give us comments and suggestions on all the chapters. And so by the time that deadline hits, you will have all of the chapters and the executive summary as well. And so August 2nd will be a comments will be due to us, and then we will bring those back to the committees for official release to the public. It won't be a final approval, it'll be released to the public. And then once we have our 30-day public comment period, which is something that's specified in that public participation plan that Jason was talking about, then we bring it back to the committees for another review with the comments and any changes that we've made or that were suggested to be made. And then after that period, we bring it back to you again for final approval of the plan. So there's still quite a bit of opportunity to review, comment, and make sure that everyone's okay with the draft as we have it. So with that, I can answer your question.
Okay.
So a question and then a comment. So will changes be made based on TAC, CAC feedback before it goes out to public process? The reason I ask is because then why don't we just participate in public process? Period, right?
Yes, and the is not necessarily that we will make changes. We'll be voting on the comments made by the committees before public release. TAC in particular didn't feel comfortable releasing it to the public before they were okay with what we were saying in the document, which is why we didn't want to release it for public comment while they could see it and you could see it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I think so, yeah. My comment is that I don't imagine much of the public taking the time to really comb through that. I mean, this is a lot of content.
Yes.
And so I think another way that this group could be helpful is maybe in drafting sort of the language for public outreach, in the sense of like, if you have a limited amount of time, here's where your time could be best spent in providing feedback on it. Or are there questions we could ask based on the TAC and CAT comments that the public could elaborate on further? More specifics for them to get into, because otherwise I don't think we're going to get much back on this because it's so cumbersome.
Yes. And that is
part of why we're going to do an executive summary
Yes.
and then make more specific public comment documents. And so once yes, it's a lot easier. We're going to make it more visual and not as much, not as verbose as the chapters are. And so that's our goal, is to bring to you the executive summary, which, will clarify and make it a lot quicker to get through all the things that are in that document. And then also, we're going to have, we're actually going to translate it into Spanish, so that'll be a part of that public participation plan. So there is plans to bring you those simplified documents. And it would be great to have comments back from you all on if that's helpful and what we could do to better summarize the documents for the public.
Okay, so will the executive summary be part of batch 2 or?
It could be batch 2, or that hasn't been started yet, so it might be a month after batch 2. Okay. We kind of wanted to wait on that before we got approval, but timing is kind of rolling, and it just keeps coming.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
Yeah, hopefully after batch 2.
All right, Jim.
I tried to get to batch 1.
Yes.
And what I got to when I clicked on the link there, I got to the list, and I could not come up. Oh, you got them. You found them.
You have to download them. You click on one and then download it.
Yeah.
Then you have to.
And it'll pull up that chapter as a Word document for review.
Hit download.
Yeah, so you have to select one of the chapters.
Right,
hit
which
download.
I did.
Hit download.
Oh,
Then
there it
pulls
is.
down to you download.
Excuse me.
Not a problem.
I had to work through that too, so it's fine.
Okay, Tim.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I tried looking at a couple of chapters. How do I know what changed?
That's hard to say. There's some chapters where a lot has changed, and then there's some that it's maybe not as much, but we don't really have track changes on there for those.
Okay. So we've got to read it from the perspective of, is this good for now?
Yes. Yeah, we haven't, the changes were made from the 2040 plan, so this is all updated to 2045. So we haven't made any changes based on comments yet, if that's, or are you saying changes based on from previous years?
I just need to know if there were any substantive changes, or it was just kind of updating things here and there. So, did we add whole chapters? Did we take out whole chapters?
Okay. I did kind of put something together like that for some of our TAC members who were also asking that same question. And so if it's helpful, I can send out that document to say this is kind of how much the pieces that we changed.
Yeah.
If that's helpful.
That would be helpful, just to know what changed.
It's a more general document. It doesn't say, go into specifics, but it does show, or does say, this chapter is completely new, or this one is.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that would help.
Okay.
Okay.
Along those lines, if there are additional changes based on our comments and TAC comments, and those are then sent out to the public, it would be very helpful to know, so we don't have to reread the whole thing from start to finish, what has changed when we get to that next step and that next approval.
Yes, definitely.
So the
I'll make
tracking
sure to
is then.
keep that separate and identify exactly what has been suggested to change and where the suggestion is, so that it's not incorporated into the document until it's approved.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Julie. Yes, go ahead.
So how are you determining in Section 5 regional transportation needs?
Okay. We did a couple of key activities for needs. You might have already seen the needs report that was done, Jennifer Valentine previously. There was a needs report done, and that included a survey and also some data analysis, so that's a portion of it. And then there's another section that we're adding to that was we reached out to key transportation and major transportation generators. So we reached out to the military and to the universities, and as well as the tourism groups, to see what kind of needs that they had related to transportation and how they tied in with the projects that have been selected and what they need that hasn't been selected yet. And so we did stakeholder interviews there as well, and then also workshops. So that's what's determining the regional needs.
Okay. So has that gone, those there hasn't been a space for public comment outside of the kind of initial outreach events, I guess. You've reached out to stakeholders, but not necessarily members of the public about needs yet.
The needs report actually did a survey that encompassed, I think that we received 717 responses from that, and so that did go out to the general public.
Okay.
And we've had other times where we've reached out to the public as well. That was before my time, so Jessica over there is telling me, yes, that's right.
Checking the processes. I remember the needs report, but just wanted to make sure I was getting the full scope.
Okay. Okay. Good questions. Do we have further questions? Okay, it's informational only, so.
Yes.
I'll
I'll send out that, we'll make sure you get the email regarding, the kind of the substantial changes from the last plan. And
Right.
if you have any questions, feel free to email me and let me know, and I'll get back to you. If you have issues with downloading the documents or anything, please let me know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, I think we're ready to move on. Member discussion. You can discuss anything but the CAC membership process. No, I'm teasing.
So done. I'm never volunteering to do anything.
Okay.
Kidding.
Do we have membership discussion? Jim? Okay. Jim, go ahead.
Well, first of all, let me compliment Courtney.
Oh, yes, definitely.
No, these are thankless processes.
They are.
And I think you've done a remarkable job, so thank you.
And you're not going to get a pay raise for it, so you know.
I just wanted to remind everybody, because we have been talking about the census,
the
Supreme Court heard oral arguments yesterday about the inclusion of the citizenship question, and so I don't know when we can expect, I suppose June, we would expect to see a decision on that and what the impact will be on the census effort.
Oh, okay, yeah. Thank you. Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment on, we were talking about reaching out to other areas of the city for membership and all that. Kono is doing an active, trying to plant organizational people in the southeast area of town. So we're trying to intentionally get them involved in neighborhood and input to us. So we're out there working at that. Anyway.
Okay. Jim, you have a...
Me?
Yes, you, a friend.
Born this way.
Oh, okay. Well, we appreciate Kono doing that. Good luck with that, too. Okay, other comments? Wow, that's good. Okay, do we have future items for CAC meeting that people would like to see on our agenda? Yes, Tim.
I'll ask again. I want CDOT-1 to give us an update on the GAP project.
Okay.
I ask
Yeah,
every month.
you're getting this down, right? Jessica? Okay, yeah, okay.
And
go ahead.
Can I just mention, only because I was at the PPACG board meeting, that we haven't gotten an I-25 My Way update or inclusion of that information to the PPACG CAC. So I'm happy to review some of my notes. They're informal from that meeting, but if you are curious about what's going on with the I-25 South Gap project, there is a website, which is i25myway.org, and there's some, well, you have all of this information, but yeah, I think Jessica can send out some contact information about how to sign up for updates. But there is a website and sort of a text. You can sign up to get text updates on what's going on with kind of construction in the process. And they've offered some commuting options outside of your vehicle that may help with some of the traffic congestion or introduce you to some new transportation modes, neither of which are bad. So if you would like a free round-trip pass on Buston, you can go to I-25 My Way and check that out. They have some carpool and van pool options as well. That said, I don't have the up-to-date specific construction updates, which I'm sure is probably what Tim is more focused on, but if you would like at least some resources, i25myway.org does have some general statewide updates for that project.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Further items. I think the gap is very important. That's definitely something we want to be abreast of it all the time. Okay, any other items that we feel we should be discussing at our CAC? Okay, well, you have the meeting schedule, and if that's it, then I think I can go ahead and adjourn us at 4:20.
Yay.
Okay, thank you, yeah.
I know.
Yeah. Sure, sure. They don't close until 5.
Air Quality Technical Committee
Yep.
has been meeting, and they are going to be beginning major community outreach regarding ozone.
Okay.
We're right on the line of becoming a non-attainment.
Yeah.
And this year is kind of a make or break it.
Right.
So we're going to be trying really hard to push